if people learned that every time, they take a nice exhalation and practice some breathing techniques, you are learning how to stabilize your spine.
Well, welcome to the program, Leslie. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
So, we are talking about your recent release called Vital Core Training. So, what inspired you to actually write this book, and what do you hope readers take away from it?
Well, great question. It's been a work in progress for quite a long time. I've been in the industry for, gosh, nearly 4 decades, if not 4 decades, and have been teaching with a small ball for most of that time. And with that being said, when I was approached by Human Kinetics, because I said to them, I said, you've got some core programs out there, or core publications, I should say, out there, but nothing is with a small ball. And this just enhances protecting the lumbar spine and allowing the other parts of the body, like the thoracic and cervical spine, to move more freely in a lot of different core exercises. And honestly, Mike, what also inspired me is so much that is posted on social media, et cetera, for core training is actually very detrimental to the unsuspecting viewer that's like, oh, I should do 100 crunches. No, you don't want to do that. And so, with that being said, I was very honored and very excited when they approached me and said, we'd love you to, write for us. And I know that they have some fantastic books out there besides the one that I've done for them. They have a lot for the fitness professional and or consumer. So it's a good company, and I feel really lucky that they asked me.
So, before we get into more questions, would you mind explaining your background a little bit and where people can find you online?
Sure. I'm happy to give you my email, which is Leslee, Leslee, at bendertraining.com. And then my website is Ageless Training Academy. And that is where either, somebody who just wants to know more about ageless training, longevity, and pain-free movement can be found there. And of course, I'm on YouTube as well. But primarily, I find the book, Vital Core Training, which is on Human Kinetics website and also on Amazon, is a fantastic publication and gives you, lots of different options as far as core training exercises, no matter what level of student and participant that you are.
Sure. So, how has your approach to core training evolved over the years?
Well, when we originally launched Benderball, one of the things is when you produce an infomercial, it's pretty much required by law that there's actually statistics and research. So we did research at Loma Linda University under the directorship of Dr. Petrosky, who at that time was running the physical therapy department. So we actually did an EMG study on the usage of the small ball, being the Bender ball, behind the low back during specific core exercises, and the activation of the deep core muscles was 408% higher than doing crunches and or utilizing a large ball. So with that being said, I think it's important that anytime someone is talking about a program, is there research behind it? Is there science behind it? And that gives it credibility. But then the person doing the program knows that there's validity behind it. So with that being said, kind of a long way to answer your question is we did the research, we did our homework on why this program is very, very different and unique to just other core programs that are out there that are, crunches and planks and things of this nature. With getting into detail, so many core exercises are truly overutilizing the hip flexors and underutilizing, our deep core muscles. And that's why people say, I've been doing crunches, et cetera, to strengthen my core, but my back hurts all the time. Well, unfortunately, you're using the wrong muscle groups. And when the lumbar spine is stable, the thoracic spine can become mobile. So once again, anybody that ever tries some of these exercises pretty much feels the immediate difference between using a ball and not using a ball, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like there's a whole other stability aspect if you have a ball behind you. I can't say I've ever used a small ball like that, but I guess for our audio only audience, Leslie's been showing it, but is it roughly the size of like a kickball? That's what it looks like.
Yeah, a kickball, a soccer ball, and they're a soft, kind of squishy ball that also has kind of a sticky surface to it. So even if you're holding it or you're utilizing it in between the knees, like when you're doing squats to realign the knees and the hips, etc., it's purposely done for fitness. And it's not like a play ball, and or like you find those cheap balls that are just the hard surface like a beach ball, something like that. Those don't work as well. You really want to have some softness so that when somebody is placing it behind the low back or the shoulders, it's not uncomfortable, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So if I know we talked a little bit about the core and the muscles involved with it, but do you care to explain more how the core is not just your abdominal muscles? Because the layperson is kind of unaware that the low back, the hip flexors, different muscles activate are technically considered core.
Well, if you think about every single time you hinge forward, for example, to get out of a chair, it becomes, I always say, create a conscious movement for a subconscious result. So, in other words, if indeed, let's say somebody's really tight in their hip flexors and they're trying to simply get up and down out of a chair, and all of a sudden they're kind of noticing, going, my back is kind of hurting me, et cetera, et cetera. Well, so much of what we do, if we're sitting for long periods of time, it's creating all this dysfunction, not only in the muscles, but also the connective tissue being your fascia. Things become short and tight, and the ability to move becomes compromised. So when I look at the core, to be honest with you, it begins from the floor. Every time our foot hits the ground, there's a chain reaction to the whole entire body. And if there's dysfunction somewhere, let's say you have a bad knee or something like that, your body starts to compromise. And this is where we start to have issues possibly in the opposite side of the body, or a shoulder injury. You're going to start compensating, etc. So I look at the body as a whole versus a part, even though using the ball does somewhat isolate out the front of the body, versus walking, which you're using everything, if that makes sense. But I think if people would realize that every time they get up out of a chair, they're using their core. Why? Glutes, hamstrings, it's all attached, right? Through our connective tissue, our fascia. And I think if people could wrap their heads around that, train your body for functionality and authenticity, there would be so much less injuries, for example, and there would also be better functionality. And the school that I went to, I'm a graduate of the Gray Institute of Applied Functional Science. That is the biggest takeaway from Gary Gray, who was my mentor, that, truly our body does work as a whole. So, I mean, like reaching over your head is going to affect different areas of our body than reaching across our body. But I don't think we think that way. We're sort of in that mindset that everything has to be isolated versus integrated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're not looking at it from a simple component. You're looking at the body as a functionality whole, because if in therapy we're a little a lot of the treatment is, oh, they have shoulder pain, let's just look at the shoulder, when realistically their pelvis could be dipped or elevated on one side, which is going to change their spine, which can affect their shoulder motion. So yeah, it's a whole chain reaction we have to kind of look at, not just one isolated spot.
Yeah, and I think if we can look at core training that way, Mike, we can really create magic. And especially like if you're watching, again, like a football game or something like that, and when you look at these athletes that are using their entire body to run, look behind them and catch a ball. I mean, that's insane, right? That's going to the extreme. But yet something as simple as, if indeed we're out of balance, something as simple as stepping off of a step, and you fall down or something like that. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. Maybe because I've been sitting all day long, my body has become kind of numb and somewhat dormant. So getting up out of your chair and stretching, like for example, every 10 minutes or so, it doesn't take but a moment to do that. You're activating your core. So it's kind of my philosophy in training is just move, get people to move. Make sense?
Sure. Yeah. So we kind of highlighted this question a little bit, but I'll ask it anyway. What role does the core play in injury prevention and overall movement efficiency?
Well, I think that's a great question. I personally think that one of the things that we need to learn to do a little bit better as humans is breathe. So keeping in mind that every time we take a nice deep breath in and we exhale out, we're affecting those deep core muscles, primarily, the deep one being the transverse abdominis. That's our big stabilizer there, and it's a respiratory muscle. And with that being said, if people learned that every time, they take a nice exhalation and practice some breathing techniques, you are learning how to stabilize your spine. You find yourself, the only time that we might be breathing is like somebody cuts in front of us and you're like, oh my God, and all of a sudden you're hyperventilating. And then now you're going, okay, I'm breathing. And then of course that changes the whole nervous system. But with that being said, not even so much as like yoga breathing, which of course is changing our sympathetic nervous system. But at the end of the day, that exhalation, which Pilates teaches, etc., allows us to activate our core. So like if you were going to throw a punch across, you would subconsciously exhale on the exertion of the movement. You wouldn't inhale. And so when I'm working with my clients, I really try to get them to focus on when they initiate the movement, you're inhaling, and this is also in my book, is to exhale to make the movement happen. And then all of a sudden, people start feeling stronger without feeling like, oh, I've got to do a million of whatever that exercise might be. So I don't know if that helps kind of answer your question, that we're, without getting into deep detail of what muscles we're actually looking at, but more of the local core muscles versus the global. The global are the ones that make things move, like the rectus abdominis, obliques, etc. But again, the deeper core muscles, those stabilizers, those are the ones that are going to help us have better posture as well.
Yeah, I think many people who are avid fitness people, or anytime you're training your legs, for instance, like if I'm at the gym, I oftentimes inhale, perform Valsalva maneuver if I'm lifting heavier, which engages my core a lot more, and then I'm exhaling on the eccentric part of it. So it's kind of like I'm much weaker, and I'm sure most people who realize this and do this, when I'm just like not paying attention to my breathing, not engaging my core, even though I'm not working core, I'm working my legs, but you have to realize it's all connected. So if you're not actually engaging it, yeah, weight feels a lot heavier then.
Well, and it's interesting too, like for example, when we put the ball behind the low back, and if you think about the position that we are in right now, for all intents and purposes, we're in a flex position, right? So the front of the body starts to shorten. So by having the ball behind the lumbar spine, and especially what I tell students to do is look up. Of course, that kind of changes the vestibular system by looking upwards, and then by slightly leaning back into the ball and rising or raising the arms up, for example, they start to have this automatic shaking happening in the front of the body. So we are used to, for all intents and purposes, shortening the rectus abdominis as to where now we're eccentrically lengthening the rectus abdominis. And you don't need to do very many of these exercises because you fatigue too quickly. And for people that are strong, and honestly, Mike, it happens it's kind of like the guy on the front cover here, and I know you showed the book as well, right? The Vital Core Training. He was my model for it. There you go. Your version of your that's clearer than mine. Thank you. Yeah. Just in the position on the front of the cover where he's holding the weights, he's looking up. The camera, because when we did the shoot, he's going, "You got to stop shaking." And this poor
Yeah,
kid is like, "What's wrong with me?" And I said, "You're doing too many crunches. Aesthetically, you look great. You got a six pack. Functionally, you're weak."
sure.
So, and here's this young guy, he's a trainer, and he said, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to start doing these all the time." And I said, "Don't do a lot of them because you don't need to. But when you think about it, if we start to lengthen and engage the front of the body, our posture is going to change because we live over computers, we live over cell phones, we're driving, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I see so many of these quote unquote core training programs, this flexion, 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 we're just emphasizing poor posture. And it's also an attitude. Somebody who's kind of flex forward, they're going within. Maybe their attitude is not real positive as to where who those people are. They walk into a room, they have great posture and great stature, they kind of command a little bit of attention, and we all have the potential to do that in the way that we train, in the way that we think about how we hold ourselves.
I would like to mention, even though the guy on the front of your book is young and active, I noticed on your website you work with 95-year-olds as well.
One of my strongest clients is 95, which is just incredible. I've had the pleasure of training, Prince Fielder, world-class athlete that played for Texas Rangers, to my 95-year-old. And to me, everyone is unique and they all need different solutions to having a good, strong core. And Prince actually came to me because he had a bad low back, and a lot of the things that we did in the book and also some equipment related movements, he's like, "I'm done." And I said, "Yeah, I don't need to see you anymore. You're strong." And if you look up, Prince Fielder, he is a big
Yeah,
dude. He's
yeah.
massive. And putting the ball behind him and have him doing some of these core exercises, he was shaking like an earthquake. He's like, "What's wrong with me?" And I'm like, "Dude, you've just been training wrong. You're doing too much crunches, and this is why your back is hurting so bad." So again, we have the potential to just, if we just switch gears and go, I'm willing and ready, I want to try something new. uh, I'm telling you, again, with the Bender ball, and you can go on the website benderball.com where you can get a ball there. It will be less expensive than buying one on Amazon, just saying. So but I really recommend, if not the Bender ball, that it is a soft fitness ball, and it's not, you're not using your kids, dodgeball or something like that.
But dodgeballs are fun.
I know.
Anyway, so what are some simple core exercises people can incorporate into their daily routines?
Well, real simple is, for example, if I place the ball behind my low back, and I don't know, you can see that. Yeah, you can see that, right? Kind of, sort
Uh,
of.
yeah, I could see
Or
it. You're
upper
behind
back.
here.
All right. So even by having the ball behind my back while I'm sitting talking to you is forcing me to press back into the ball and is enhancing better posture. And just by simply pressing into the ball a small amount, I'm feeling my core engage without me even trying to do anything, because it's the surface of it, the circumference, and there's that kinesthetic feedback. So once again, I've got a lot of clients who now drive. They have to drive long distance. They put the ball behind them. That's a simple way to do it. Being aware of your posture every day is a way to be cognizant of what your core is doing. For example, yeah, there's so many exercises, and honestly, where it's pictured very well is in the book. And I can't recommend enough that you get the book, because it's so helpful. I'm a visual person. I don't know about you, but it's hard to describe a core exercise versus, oh, she's describing this and now I see what it looks like.
Yeah, so your book kind of breaks down each part into more specific on how to do everything, and then later on you kind of just have some nice diagrams of progressions and variations of
Mm-hmm.
stuff to do.
Yeah.
So no, it's broken down very well. Yeah, the it's kind of interesting you just put the ball behind you because years ago we were like, looking at like just working on thoracic extension, when you're flexed so much. So I threw a kickball behind someone, and Bob and Brad are like, oh, and now they literally preach that, but with like a hallelujah stretch with it. So it's kind of funny. You like have the same principle. I'm like, well, we never met before this, so it's kind of
I
interesting.
know. I mean, what's up with that? But and honestly, things happen very organically, and I feel like, again, when I have strong individuals like this kid on the cover, and to look at someone like this, you'd be like, oh my God, the guy spends his life in the gym. He looks so strong. And yet you do a movement like this and he's struggling, really struggling with it, leads us to believe, if you will, that so many people are doing core exercises that are actually detrimental. And I go back to overusing the hip flexors. So Stuart McGill, who is, I believe he's up in Waterloo. Have you heard of Stuart McGill? Back
Yeah,
here in
I've interviewed him.
Yeah, and I mean, he's done a lot of research on core exercises, et cetera, and really what's being facilitated. And I think one of his best diagrams is the straight leg lift and lower, where you're laying on your back and you're lifting your legs and lowering them. And people are under the assumption that they're working their lower abs, but yet when you look at the activation being over 42% of hip flexors, iliopsoas iliacus and rectus femoris, I mean, at the end of the day, that has a huge influence negatively on our backs and also on our, like for our knees, for example. I'm a recipient of a knee replacement a few years back. And the first thing the doctor said is, he goes, man, your left hip flexor has been tight for a long time. And I said, yeah, I mean, I work on it now all the time, but problem is after overuse for so many years, you've already created a really bad structure in your skeletal system out of alignment. And so many people don't realize they're overusing their hip flexors in core exercises, especially Pilates. I mean, Pilates is all about laying down on your back and kicking your legs. And I'm like, no, stop doing it. But then Pilates wasn't an exercise physiologist. But yet again, people are under the perception, I'm sure you hear it too, no pain, no gain. If I'm not burning, I'm not squeezing, I'm not tucking, and I'm, in agonizing pain, I'm not working out. It's like, how long do you want your body to function? Just saying.
Yeah, it's I had very tight hip flexors. I know I'm bulky and don't look like a distance runner, but I've ran marathons and I had some hip issues and my hip flexors are really tight, but luckily I started addressing them in my mid 30s. I'm in my late 30s now, but luckily I loosened them back up a lot so I don't have the hip pain. But yeah, I can see if I would have stuck on that route and not known what to do, I could see how it can lead to issues.
Well, we need to send you a ball and you need to try some of these movements.
Sure.
So you can truly say, I understand what she's talking about. Because once again, what I have students do is place the ball behind the back, lean back, and actually palpate their hip flexors. And they're relatively relaxed. And then lean back and take the ball away. And because the hip flexors are kind of fight or flight, they immediately contract. And because they attach on your thoracic spine, all of a sudden, I mean, they're doing their job. They're saying, hey, I'm going to protect your back. That's what I do. And once again, like, V sit-ups, I mean, you still see people like in the gym and they've got a big medicine ball and they're twisting back and forth 100 miles an hour. And, I cringe when I think of what they're doing to their lumbar spine because there's no protection there.
Sure. Yeah, I try to work my core in every which direction. I felt that has helped because I was starting to get some low back pain too with running, and that's made a big difference. But I do like a bunch of extension, a bunch of laterals, and then a bunch of full GHD flexion. So I go into extension and then back up. But I could see how the ball would work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it does. And the other thing that it can be used for too, like in some of the images, is like when people are squatting, it helps align the hips. And I never used the verbiage to like squeeze the ball, but yet when the ball is just above the knees and you're activating your adductors, and especially for women that are postnatal and they need to, strengthen the pelvic floor, just by simply squatting and standing and extending the knees, and just a very light engagement of those inner thighs allows for that pelvic floor to lift. And this is where I'll circle back into the breath, that inhale and that exhale, lifting up our diaphragm and pelvic floor is so, again, that is vital core training. For women, again, that have had children, it's very beneficial. So there's so many usages for this small ball, and I'm so glad that Human Kinetics saw the value of doing something very different.
So, how often should someone be training their core?
That depends. I think it depends on the individual. I get, well, I guess it'd be like, how many times a day do you brush your teeth? I think if you incorporate components of core training into your daily activities, like 5 days a week. And again, you're not going to fatigue. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go do leg day or I'm going to do core day. But let's say you do let's just, for example, since you said, for example, you worked your legs. Well, you want to obviously do the opposite and lengthen the hip flexors, et cetera, after you've done some legs. But then you can then do some core exercises with the ball. You can ramp it up by holding onto some weights if you really want to intensify it. But I think by incorporating some of these exercises on a daily basis is awesome. But again, we're not doing 20 to 30 reps of these because you'll fatigue too quickly. But you add in 10 reps of something, maybe in between your sets of legs, et cetera. You're giving those big muscles a break for a moment, and then you're focusing on core, and then you go back. So I'm a big believer in alternating your training from one body part to the other, if that makes sense.
Sure. So you mentioned putting the ball behind someone's back for something they can just do anywhere in a chair, but for someone who's never trained core before, is there anything else they should do, or where should they start?
I would say, a chair is the perfect place if you're somebody, let's say you have a back or a knee injury, and getting up and down off the floor is just not, it's not going to happen for you. Believe it or not, you can actually, like, before you lay down in bed, for example, you can place the ball behind you. That way you're not getting up and down off the floor. And even for people to lean back into the ball a little bit and just feel the front of the body. I have two ladies that I train, both of which are quite large. And for them, they can't let go of their thighs. So it's a modification, it's a regression, if you will. And for them, it's wonderful because I can see them gaining strength. Each week, they might let go with one hand or something like that, so that it allows them to progress safely. Because once again, core training is so much thought of is lying on your back, right? As to where you don't have to with the ball. You can, again, be in a seated position, and or you can be in a vertical position and place the ball behind your low back against a wall. Sure. And you can do these movements and it's great because that way you can still get some extension back to neutral, which if you're just up against a wall, like a flat surface, you don't have a load to explode. This is going to give you some load to explode. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, just simple ways to modify it for new people. Obviously, if they can get to the floor and you're new, you can still do that. But we obviously have a wide range of audience listening here. So if someone is on the opposite spectrum, well, we already kind of talked about Prince Fielder, I guess, being a MLB player, but athletes, how can they improve their performance using this?
Well, I would say with every sport, and of course, pickleball is massive now. And if you think about one of the biggest injuries in pickleball right now is Achilles tendon, calves being tight, Achilles being tight. Oh, I mean, people are going from couch to court and they're getting injured. And I see it all the time. I play occasionally and I love it. I think it's fun. But they don't warm up correctly. And so a good friend of mine, matter of fact, she tore her hamstring and she's still suffering from it. And where the ball can come in and where core training can come in is, all that lateral movement, all that rotational movement. And even if you're using the ball, for example, to hold on to as something kinesthetic. So if you're doing your side bending, in the book, it shows how to lengthen your calves, how to lengthen your hips before any activity, which again, whether you're a high-end athlete and or if you're a beginning athlete, for example, it's vital that you look at, how do I want my body to perform? And people, for example, if they like to run, they might just jog to begin with, but they haven't done any lateral movement because they're only moving in one plane of motion. They're going forward versus going side to side, and just allowing our body to adapt to different stimulus is so vital in core training, if that makes sense. So kind of a roundabout way to answer that question is, no matter what level of athlete you are, the warm up is vital. The like your pre-game or your pre-whatever, so that you can do what you want to do. But again, pickleball, the injuries coming out of that. Oh, and not to mention shoulder.
Yeah. I actually have a pickleball game scheduled for later today. So
scratch.
I lifted earlier. I'm warmed up somewhat still, but yeah, I usually take it easy the first game till I get moving better. But yeah, the first time I played after months off, even though I'm very active, I was a little sore the next day. I don't do a lot of rotational stuff, so.
I think one of the best things you can do, especially, well, depending on whether you're playing inside or out, is, find a wall, and this is Gary Gray's stuff, is to place your hands up on the wall. Does that make sense? Take your right foot behind you. So you're like in a lunge position. Does that make sense? So you're in a staggered lunge, but your hands are on the wall, right?
Yeah.
Right foot is back. And you want to make sure all 10 toes are facing forward. And then take your left foot off the floor and then bend the left knee and then just swing the leg back and forth like a pendulum. So what starts to happen is you loosen up the hip, but what you're really feeding into is that right calf and Achilles.
Sure.
That is such a good warm up for any kind of rotational sport.
Yeah, it kind of just sounds like the leg swings before running is what sounds like you're referencing.
Yeah, leg swing. Yeah.
No.
It's feeding the calf more than it's really feeding into the hip.
Sure, because you're stabilizing with that leg.
Yeah, right.
I'll see if I get there early enough to do that, or I'll have to do it beforehand. Yeah, I'm doing indoor because we just got a snowstorm here in Minnesota, so yeah, it's indoor.
Oh, so, yeah, that makes sense.
Wow. So, are there common mistakes people make when training their core that can cause harm?
Well, I think I've touched on this. Is being on your back and doing crunches, you're just compressing your spine, and there's a lot coming out about really stop doing crunches. And besides that, you're pulling on your neck. So you're starting to, shorten up your neck flexors by doing crunches. And I would have to say, sadly, there's more bad core exercises out there than are good. But again, those that are listening, is buyer beware. I mean, if you're looking for someone who you're asking their advice on training, find out what their background is. I mean, what are their certifications? What do they actually know about core training? Or is it just something, that they've seen on social media? And I think that's the hardest thing, is because there's so many influencers out on social media that are not even certified trainers. And that for me is always, that's a big red flag for me. So, and I think, planking is obviously not a bad way to do core training, but it's not the end of all means, especially with people that do have carpal tunnel or wrist issues. Being in a plank for a long period of time, it's not really facilitating more strength, but more pain. You can always do like planking on your forearms or up against a wall. I mean, at the end of the day, we're really strengthening the shoulder complex, and also planking, you are strengthening, again, those local core muscles, being our transverse, etc. However, it's just one component. I mean, I've got some planks in the book, but there's a lot more movement vertically and or kneeling, side lying, et cetera, to have that load to explode. Because once again, if you're laying against a hard surface, you can only go into flexion. You can't really go into extension. So once again, something behind the back, whether it's a ball or a pillow, it's way more efficient.
Sure. So, what modifications do you recommend for people recovering from injuries or dealing with chronic pain? I know we kind of talked about if you can't get to the floor, bed, or wall. Are there any other suggestions you have?
Well, especially for women that have rectus diastasis, uh, any kind of flexion you want to avoid. And that's going to be sort of including with what I do with my ball, that you would be holding on to the side of your thighs and, breathing. I think one of the best modifications, again, is in a seated position, good posture, place the ball in between the thighs and just gently engage, your adductors, which again are part of your, the pelvic floor. And I know this sounds simple to you and I, but to somebody who's coming off of an injury, you're easing them into feeling things. And then you progress by putting the ball behind the back in a chair. And I know it sounds really simplistic, but when it's done right, it's pretty awesome. People start to progress quicker, I think, with the ball than without it. And I see it all the time. Like my average Monday, oh, how many people did I see Monday? On my Monday, I saw 80 people.
Oh, geez.
I
It must be group classes, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah, they are.
Oh, okay. I was going to say 80 individuals.
80 individuals, yeah, no. But, at the end of the day, even though I still am presenting at conferences, et cetera, I feel to be a better speaker, to be a better trainer, you've got to have boots on the ground. You've got to be working with real clients in order to speak about these questions that you are asking me, because I've got everybody and anybody in my classes. And, having the ball is an automatic modification, immediate modification, because now they have a kinesthetic feedback. And it's like, oh, I know how far I shouldn't go back or how far I should go back, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, you're strong. I'm going to give you some weights today. You're just getting started. We're not going to use weights with you. So again, the magic, I can't say enough about it. And I'm not saying that because, I've been working with this ball for so many years, but I've seen just amazing results. And when I hear people say my back pain is gone since I've been using the ball, it's like my work is done here.
I think the most important question is why green for the ball?
Oh, dear. That was the very first color. You'll be happy to know it comes in blue, black, blue, black, and a really pretty purple now. So the original owner, sold to his partner. And the first thing that his partner, Stu, who now owns the company, the first question Stu asked me, he said, "Can I change the color of the ball?" I'm like, "Will you please?" I've seen this color for way too long. And so it just gives variety, having different color options. But the original color was green. Why they chose that, I don't know.
You don't see too many green balls, so I guess it'd be identifiable possibly,
Oh, it most certainly is. It's pretty impressive to me that I can go all the way and, teach at a conference in Korea, and there they are, like, damn. But I mean, just to clarify, it's not my company. I was chosen as the talent to develop the program. And that's pretty much with, any infomercial that or fitness program is they always hire, they hire somebody. And then, Jeff Tiller had asked me, he said, "How do you feel about Bender Ball?" And I'm like, that's brilliant. You can use my last name. So really, to be honest with you, Mike, what it did do is it launched my career. And I haven't looked back. I'm still doing what I do, and in my 60s, and I love what I'm doing because now kind of sliding into that active ager category is massive. As you know, your audience is filled with 50 plus viewers, and we're looking for alternatives. We want to be doing from snow skiing to water skiing to whatever somebody's passion is what keeps you young. It's when we become sedentary because we've had an injury, for example, like exercising incorrectly, and you have this horrible injury and you can't move. Depression and everything starts to really set in, right? So I can't stress enough for the viewers that are listening to this program that, is to keep moving and, find something that you enjoy doing, but you've also got to train that's going to enhance whatever it is that you enjoy doing. And it just makes your life so much richer.
So, how does core strength relate to balance and stability? Because most people probably won't correlate the two, but with our backgrounds, we can see it.
Um, well, especially if you're doing, you're trying to balance on one foot. Let's put it that way. You're doing a balance test. And when you actually learn how to hold your posture better, um, your balance becomes better as well. As to where somebody who has poor body awareness and uh, what's the word I'm looking for? They don't have good kinesthetic awareness, for example. We can help enhance that. For example, again, we've got images in the book where a person can, you know, as a trainer, we can always say, put your hand on the wall. We've seen that, or hand on a chair, right? Now you're creating a stable surface for them to be on. We got to progress you. Now let's put the ball on the wall and place your hand on top of the ball. And now you're creating a little bit of an unstable surface, which is progression. Because at the end of the day, our feet, with all the proprioceptors in our feet, are constantly navigating different surfaces, different shoes, different environments, et cetera, et cetera. So the more that we can create almost unnatural environments to train your vestibular system, to train your balance, is kind of vital, if that makes sense. Because I know, like in a lot of different scenarios, like chair classes, which is great, don't get me wrong. But I find that if people are just moving their arms and they're sitting and they're not standing up, that's not improving your balance. It's improving motion, which is important. But we're talking about people that really do need to get up and get down out of a chair, because once you start losing that ability, it's not a good thing.
No, and a lot of people, I would say if you're directly talking about the core, if people have really bad posture, you're going to throw off your whole mechanics. So if you're really hunched over, your weight is shifted posteriorly, which is going to
Yep.
make just your balance and everything more difficult to maintain.
Yeah, and I used to live in Florida, but I'm back on the West Coast now, and the amount of that hunched forward kyphotic posture, especially with all the retirees there, it's an epidemic. It's sad to see it. And once again, one of the simplest solutions: put the ball behind your back when you're watching TV. When you're sitting in your chair, get that ball there and press into it, and your posture starts to improve. Your quality of life will improve when your posture improves. And it doesn't have to be a crazy routine to make that happen.
No, it's pretty simple. So
Yep.
if listeners, sorry.
Go ahead.
So if listeners could take just one thing away from this conversation, what should it be?
Oh, I got more. I got a lot of nuggets, but
You can give me more than one nugget.
I'm giving you a lot of nuggets. I would say is be aware of what you're doing. So in other words, when you're training, what are you feeling? What's your goal? What are you hoping to achieve in and out of the gym, so that you can be the very best that you are, no matter what age you are, no matter what it is that you love to do, and how can you yourself personally keep doing what you love to do. And that to me is enhancing your quality of life more than anything. Instead of feeling like I've got to get into the gym every day, I think we get obsessed with that, as opposed to get outside, take a walk, do something that enriches your soul, enriches your being. I think you'll find that at the end of the day, when we wrap this now around core, is adding in some of the core exercises that you will find in your book will make this even more enjoyable and enhance your life in so many ways. It will enrich your life. So that was kind of a long nugget. Sorry.
It's all right. So, do you want to mention again where people can find you at online?
Sure. Well, I am Leslee, Leslee, at bendertraining.com, Leslie at bendertraining.com. Feel free to email me. I respond. I'm very good about it. I get a lot of questions. And again, this is my profession. This is what I love to do. I am on Facebook. I also, I'm on Instagram. I am, just Google Leslee Bender. You'll find me there. And then, of course, my website is Ageless Training Academy. And if you're interested, it is a 4-hour online program. We do provide continuing education for ACE, AFA, NASM, National Pilates Certification, that organization, and Canadian credit. So we do provide credits in our program. That's one. And then we also have the Bender Ball, which is on the Bender Ball website, certification as well. That's another 4-hour training, which aligns completely with the book. The other one is more about myofascial release work and movement. But if you're looking for just this guy and you're looking for a program that you as a trainer, or maybe even not even as a trainer, that is on the Bender Ball website. So that is an online program that we've just loaded on. And I know myself, I take a lot of online programs just to enhance my education, not necessarily like, oh, I'm going to become a 200-hour yoga instructor. I'm taking it because I enjoy it. So if you're a person that loves to learn and you'd like to learn at your leisure, both of these websites do provide 2 different remarkable educations.
So, for all the listeners, we can put it in the show notes or the description box. All the links she was talking about, maybe a little easier for you to find there. Thank you, Leslee, for joining me today.
Thank
And
you.
if anyone's interested in the book, Amazon, and then Human Kinetics, is that correct?
Yeah, Human Kinetics, both I think are priced the same. And then if, of course, you need the ball to go with the program, that will be on benderball.com. You will get the ball for quite a bit less money than on Amazon. And I need your address, sir, because you need, we've talked about this. You have the book but without the ball. You're a classic example. It's not going to work. You have to have the product.
All right, I'll have to get a Bender ball and see how it goes.
Yes, you will. Well, thank you so much, and sharing your time with me, and in any way that I can be helped to everyone that's listened to this today. I do have one more nugget. This is something to take away: is your abs are made in the kitchen, but your core is strong by training correctly. So you can't do this and then go have a donut. Just saying.
Took me a long time to discover that, but yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and I look forward to working with you again.